Have you ever noticed, while looking through a window screen to a patterned surface like bricks or shingles or siding, that if you slowly move your head, it causes a rippling visual effect as portions of the patterned surface are revealed or obscured by the screen? When I was a kid, I loved producing effects like this. It reminded me of visual effects I saw in TV shows and movies, but conveniently required no special machinery to generate. We can create a similar effect on a screen with just a series of lines. Let's start with a white background and a series of black lines. Now let's bring in a second identical set of lines. Even just changing the size, we can start to see this shifting effect. Okay, now they're superimposed exactly, and let's start moving one of them from side to side. If we consider the distribution of these stripes to be their frequency, it's analogous to the frequency of an oscillator in a synthesizer. Two sets of stripes at the same frequency, shifting across one another, can be said to be going in and out of phase. If we set up two oscillators, say two sides of a DPO, to play at the same frequency and mix them together, we can create a similar effect. If we detune one very slightly, then they begin to go in and out of phase. In this case, when they're fully out of phase, the two oscillators actually cancel each other out. It's a little more fluid than the visual version we were looking at. Instead of obscuring each other, the oscillators sound like they're mixing in an almost liquid fashion. They sound, rather than two discrete tones, like one tone that is constantly changing. Similarly, with the DPO final output, we can create a fold or two and then make them ripple across each other by adjusting the angle control. In this case, it's all coming off the same core, and so the different folds are happening at the same frequency, but constantly changing phase. Frequency and phase are related, of course, but we don't need to get into that nitty-gritty here. So we notice that the sonic effect of phase shifting is different, but related to the visual effect. What about the sonic effect at different frequencies? These oscillator examples were at audio rate, but it's also possible to create phasing effects at what Curtis Rhodes would name the Mesotime scale. Performers playing phrases at different lengths, for example, or multiple sequence patterns on a sequencer doing the same. See the minimalist sequencing patch from scratch video for an example of that. Before we move on, let's take a look at the most recent listening exercise. We got a lot of responses here. Okay, let's take a look at the actual origin of the sound. We have three finalists here. G.D. Hanks writes, "Is that a janitor ice skating on a frozen rainbow and falling through?" Lightright writes, "I'm fairly certain that is an iguana munching artisanal, flash-frozen kale out of a glass bowl." Adam McCoy writes, "The sound of breaking angel hair pasta over a glockenspiel." In one way, everybody got it right. But in another more accurate way, Adam McCoy nailed it. Let's send them a t-shirt. While thinking about phase shifting in music, I was reading through an old favorite, Alan Strange's Electronic Music, and I found a patch that kind of utilizes audio rate and performance rate phase effects both at once. So let's check it out. We've come a long way with these intro animations. I made that one myself years back, and you can tell. Big shout to Lewis for the much better made animations we get to use today. Okay, so Strange calls this patch timbre cycles. There are two elements to it. The repeating note patterns are different lengths. One is 5 notes, and the other is 4. But also, the notes are all tuned to fifths and octaves of each other, the most simple of tuning ratios, and then patched through a ring modulator and mixed with one of the unmodulated voices. The result is a brief juxtaposed loop that also has a sub-melody superimposed on it. Let's call it a super melody. I've put the two melodies into René here, and we'll use the two sine waves of the DPO to generate them. Here they are mixed in the Mod mix. By moving the bottom one to the modulator input, we hear the top channel unmodulated, and then the two modulated together in the bottom one. Differing cycle rates cause these melodies to go in and out of phase, creating, as strange notes, a series of 20 different tuning ratios. He writes, by mixing the resulting timbral sequence with the output of VCO2, the result is a 4-note pattern imposed on a sequence of 20 timbres. Strange has a separate envelope generator and VCA, separating these into discrete notes. We can alter this further by changing up the octave ranges of our René channels. Or by adding vertical movement to the Cartesian channel. What Strange doesn't mention is that quantized equal temperament note sequences do not create perfect tuning ratios for anything other than octaves. So we're also hearing some phase drifting within each of the 20 timbres as well. When looking through a Windows screen at phasing patterns, the effect is quite dependent on your particular vantage point, and specifically focusing neither on the screen nor on the objects beyond, but rather on the relation between the two. The patterns under discussion don't exist in either of the two objects being observed. They must be synthesized by a third party, the viewer, listener, or synthesist. Pareidolia is a word for meaningful interpretations being imposed on stimuli. In other words, the precognitive perception of patterns. It was once considered a disorder, but is now considered a normal human tendency. I find this unsurprising because the recognition and exploration of patterns is crucial to so much human activity, whether interpretive or, better yet, creative. Happy patching.